It started on one of those late summer evenings where the world feels calm enough to trick you into thinking nothing bad could possibly happen. Warm air rolling in off the fields, the sun melting into that mix of orange and purple on the horizon. 17 miles outside of Ashford, 19-year-old Jamal Turner was driving his dad's old Chevy pickup home from track practice, muscles still humming from sprints, the smell of fresh-cut grass drifting in through the cracked window. He wasn't in a rush, just thinking about grabbing a cold drink at the corner store, maybe texting his dad back when he stopped. Then came the blue lights. First one set in the rear view, then a second, then a third, moving in close like they'd practiced it. Jamal's foot eased off the gas without him even realizing. 43 and a 45 seatbelt on, music barely whispering, there was nothing to pull him for. But the shoulder came up fast, gravel crunching under the tires as he rolled to a stop. Hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, just like his dad had drilled into him since he was 15. A door slammed. The first cop later, he had learned his name was Harlan Reeves, walked up, slow, heavy boots, grinding the gravel, hand resting not on a ticket book, but on his holstered gun. Jamal kept his voice level, careful. "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Reeves didn't answer, just yanked the driver's side door so hard it smacked Jamal's knee. "Out of the truck." Now. Two more officers slid into position, forming that little triangle of control they teach in whatever training manual covers intimidation. The air felt thicker, hotter, though the sun had barely dipped. Jamal stepped out, shoulders back, palms open. "What's this about still nothing?" Then a hand clamped on his forearm, squeezing too tight, like it was more about sending a message than securing a suspect. A shove from the second officer caught him off balance. By the time his snakers found the gravel, again the third one was at his back, forcing him down. Knees hit first, sharp sting from the rocks, then his hip, then his cheekbone. "Stop resisting," one barked. "I'm not," but his face was already shoved into the dirt, taste of grit and copper on his tongue, a knee grinding into his back. Boots slammed into his ribs, each one a bright flash of pain that made his breath come in shallow gasps. He heard one of them chuckle, low and cruel. When they finally dragged him up, plastic cuffs bit into his wrists so hard his hands tingled. In the cup holder, his phone buzzed, Dad calling, but he couldn't turn far enough to see it. The back of the cruiser smelled like stale vinyl and something sour. Through the closing door, he caught one last look at the pickup driver's door, hanging open like it was still waiting for him to climb back in. By the time his father, Marcus Turner, made it to County General, the antiseptic smell had already crawled into his lungs. A nurse led him past curtained bays until the only thing he saw was his boy lying under a tangle of wires. Jaw wired shut, one eye swollen shut, ribs wrapped tight. Marcus just stood there, hands on the cold metal rail, knuckles white. "They did this to you." It wasn't really a question. The doctor started listing injuries in that clipped clinical tone, fractures, swelling, no internal bleeds. But Marcus heard almost none of it. His eyes were on Jamal's fingers, twitching even in unconsciousness, and on the gravel cuts along his cheek. He wanted to touch his boy's face but didn't dare. The system had promised justice too many times in his life for him to believe it now. Still, he went to the prosecutor, sat across from some man in a cheap tie who slid a paper-thin file across the desk. A couple of photos, a note about malfunctioning cameras, and the magic words, "insufficient evidence." Then the insult, "Your son resisted arrest." They followed protocol. Protocol. Marcus had heard that word when he was 17, standing in a courtroom for a charge that was just as empty as this one. Back then, protocol meant they walked free and he carried the record. Now it meant his son's blood in the gravel and no one paying for it. He left without raising his voice. Didn't need to. The decision was made before he even reached the parking lot. There was a man he'd been once, a man he'd buried so his boy could grow up without seeing him that way. That man was awake again. One call. That's all it took. By nightfall, four men were walking into an old auto shop on the edge of town. Leon Tank Marshall, big enough to make doorways nervous. Benny Cruz, camera eyes and restless hands. Darius Cole, a trucker who knew how to follow without being seen, and the one they just called Ghost, who could be standing next to you without you knowing it. Marcus laid out photos, names, addresses. These are the ones, he said. No kids, Ghost reminded him. No kids, Marcus agreed. For a week, they watched. Morning coffee runs, gym visits. What time the porch lights clicked off, Benny's long lens caught Reeves leaning against his cruiser, smirking at something on his phone. Tank mapped out security systems in his head. Darius trailed them through traffic like he was reading sheet music. Ghost found blind spots they didn't know they had. Then came the first message at 3:45 a.m. In front of Officer Cullen's neat little ranch house, fire bloomed under his SUV, a deep whooshing roar that woke the cul-de-sac. Curtains twitched, dogs barked, painted on the sidewalk in dripping red. My son's pain costs more than your badge. Cullen stood barefoot in the yard, face lit by the flames, looking smaller than Marcus had ever seen him. After that, the packages started showing up. A burned sleeve from a uniform, a badge snapped in two, photos of wives hanging laundry kids in backyards, not to threaten them, but to say, we see you. Each box packed with quiet precision. The department pretended it was business as usual, but Marcus knew better. Fear changes the way a man walks. 2 weeks and Sanders and Doyle, both in the triangle that night, walked out of a dive bar into a parking lot that suddenly went black as the street lamps cut out. Before either could find their footing, Tank had Sanders' arms pinned zip ties locking. Doyle turned toward the bar, but Ghost was there, one strike folding him against the van. In the warehouse under a single humming light, Marcus paced around them, a bat resting on his shoulder. My boy couldn't run, he said quietly. Neither can you. This about payback, Doyle muttered. It's about you understanding the fear you left him with. When the lights clicked off, the darkness was so complete you could feel it pressing in. By sunrise, a jogger found them tied to separate trees, badges hammered above their heads, and the words carved deep into the bark. You can't breathe now either. The news ate it up. The department locked its doors twice. Riker was next. He tried to pack a bag, get out of town. He made it 40 miles before 2 sets of headlights boxed him in and a van cut across his lane. Glass-shattered hands dragged him out onto the asphalt. Marcus crouched down so they were eye to eye. You had your traffic stop, he said, voice low and calm. Now I have mine. Riker disappeared that night. No body, no answers. Just a silence that made every other cop in Ashford jump at shadows. Weeks passed. The precinct felt smaller, tighter. Laughter in the break room was gone, replaced by murmurs and coffee spoons clinking. New recruits learned fast to keep their heads down. Veterans checked over their shoulders on the way to their cars. Some left town for a while, but came back looking no more rested than when they'd gone. And then one soft afternoon, a white medical van pulled up in front of Marcus' house. The nurse lowered the ramp, and there was Jamal, thinner bruises, faded to yellow jaw, still wired, but his eyes were steady. Marcus gripped the wheel, handles held them a moment longer than necessary. The crew was there too, Tank leaning on the railing. Benny with his hands in his pockets, Darius crouched on the steps, Ghost sitting quiet. Nobody spoke. Jamal looked at his father, then at the men, then tapped the side of Marcus' boot. That was it. No speech, no dramatics, just that small, deliberate touch. Marcus adjusted the chair so his boy faced the street. The breeze caught Jamal's face. The world beyond the porch was quiet, but it wasn't the same. Boundaries existed now. It wasn't over. Marcus knew the system would try to reset to pretend nothing had shifted, but the line had been drawn. And everyone who'd crossed it once was now living with the knowledge that next time there'd be a consequence. Some will say Marcus went too far. Others will say he didn't go far enough. Me. I think about that line between justice and revenge. How thin it gets when the people in charge of protecting you are the ones who break you. So tell me, if it were your son in that hospital bed, would you have done any different? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is where the real conversation starts.